Hi. So I'm here to talk to you about anger. Have any of you ever wondered where we would be without anger? I've asked myself that question. And do you get a picture in your mind of perhaps world peace? Or a quiet existence where everybody's getting along really well? And shiny, happy people, perhaps? No outbursts, everybody's just getting along really nicely? But you know, I would say that I don't think that's what we'd end up with. I don't think we'd end up with that at all. In fact, I think we'd be in deep trouble. I know I would be. I definitely know I would be. In fact, I've got a story to tell you about that, but I'll come back to that a little later. But first, let me clarify what I mean when I'm talking about anger. I'm talking about the emotion of anger. Just like we would talk about the emotion of sadness, or the emotion of joy, or the emotion of fear, perhaps. But I want to talk about the emotion of anger. And I think anger has taken a bad rap in our society. Because when we talk about anger, I think many people immediately go to somebody behaving badly. We think of shouting, we think of somebody having a temper tantrum, we think of bullying, perhaps verbal, physical abuse, maybe even violence. What I'd say about that, though, is those are learned behaviors. Those are behaviors that we have about how we want to express ourselves, and often not very skillfully, by the way. And what I would say, though, is that hanging around at home with our blinds closed for months on end is probably not a good way to deal with sadness. Punching somebody in the face is probably not a good way to deal with our frustration. And so what I'd say is that without the impetus of anger, I think most of us would probably do absolutely nothing. We would keep doing the same thing over and over again. Anger gives us the impetus to make changes. Without anger, I think we would probably just keep going on, doing the same thing. So anger informs us that something needs to be addressed and something needs to be changed. There's something that needs to be looked at. Something needs to happen. And what I would say is, without anger, we would probably see less outbursts, that's for sure. But I'm hunching that we'd probably see a lot more depressed and apathetic people walking around with a lot more violations going on and nobody doing or saying anything about it. So that brings me to this big wave that's just happened about the Me Too movement. And you probably all know a little bit about the Me Too movement. This is large numbers of women and men who've had sexual violations, ongoing sexual violations that are happening. And most of these people are trying to deal with this sexual violation with sadness and fear. And sadness asks us to go inside, to grieve, and to release. Fear, on the other hand, asks us to withdraw from a situation, protect ourselves, move away from danger. What neither of those emotions do is galvanize us into action. That is the role of anger. Anger is the emotion that gets us into action, gets us moving. And that sexual violations, these ongoing sexual violations that are happening here, if we don't do something about that, they will continue, and the people who are abusing that power will continue to not face responsibility for their actions. Without that voice, without that anger, that behavior continues. And in fact, what it does is actually supports the continuing existence of inequality in our society. It allows it to keep going on. Anger is the emotion that helps us get our voice. It's that emotion that helped those people get their voice. And that's what it did. It helped them to speak up. And in the beautiful voice of Princess Jasmine from the most recent movie, Aladdin, many of you maybe have seen it, where she's being told not once but twice that she needs to be seen and not heard. when those around her are trying to silence her, she stops cooperating. She gets angry, and she sings, "You can't keep me quiet. I will not be silenced. I will not go speechless." Let's talk for a moment about Greta Thunberg. This young lady, 15 at the time, she's now 16, she's from Sweden. She was finding herself very, very upset, very despondent and angry about what she thought was inaction on the topic of climate change. She looked around her and she saw the adults who she thought were tolerating and even condoning the continuing degradation of the environment and even of the species on the planet. And she's thinking to herself, oh, we're in deep trouble. So she becomes quite despondent, quite depressed, spends quite a bit of time in her bedroom, not doing very well. She's a self-confessed quiet girl. She's the one, she says, that would be at the back of the class. She would never say anything. She would keep her mouth quiet. She would not speak up. But she finds herself getting really bummed out about this whole thing, and she decides, you know what? I'm going to get angry about this. Being depressed about this is getting me nothing. So she gets angry. So what she does is she leaves school on a Friday. She makes herself a little sign, says, "School strike for climate." She goes down and sits in front of the Swedish Parliament buildings with her sign. Every Friday, faithfully, this young lady goes down and sits there in front of the Swedish Parliament buildings by herself, not knowing whether anybody's paying any attention or even cares that she's sitting there. But she does it faithfully every Friday. She goes and sits. And finally, people start to come and join her. They come and sit with her. More and more people come and join her. This was on August 20th, 2018 she did this. Just a few weeks ago, on May 24th, 2019, Greta's anger spurred on action. People from 110 countries, an estimated 1.4 million people across the globe, struck for climate change. That's fantastic. Her anger spurred on a movement that went viral. Small ripple, big wave. Wonderful that she did this. And her action has actually spurred on several countries to come up with new green deals and actually even to pass policies that handle greenhouse emissions, getting even more stringent. She has done this. Her anger has spurred this action on. And in fact, you'll get to see her on the front cover of Time magazine this month. She's going to be there, all because she decided that she needed to speak about this. I think that's just brilliant. So what does anger require of us? Each one of us is born with this wonderful emotion of anger. It's absolutely important. It informs us and it alerts us that we need to pay attention. There's something that we need to look at. If we swallow it, if we deny it, if we shove it aside, we pretend it's not there, we actually are denying ourselves. It's an extreme act of self-denial, an act of violence against the self. It is not an act of self-care. It's an act of self-denial. And so what I would say to that is we need to become experts on anger, experts on ourselves, and that's what anger requires of us. We need to become experts on ourselves, what our tastes are, what our needs are, what our interests are. Without that, we can't advocate for ourselves. We will not have the voice to do that. We will sacrifice ourselves for harmony. We'll give in to get along. Denial is at the very heart of some of the most serious and damaging anger problems we see in our society today. That self-denial, that is behind it. If we try to eliminate anger and conflict from our lives, it doesn't go anywhere. It just goes underground. And what we then do is we don't honor our needs, and we resort to sneak attacks, guerrilla warfare, passive-aggressive moves, giving in to get along. I know most of you have all probably done one of those things in your life. I know I have. But we can't eliminate this. And if we do that, if we constantly do that and camouflage our anger, what ends up happening is we start becoming distant from ourselves. We don't even know what our own tastes, our own needs, our own preferences are. We start to not even know who we are. And that's not what we want. I love how Carla McLaren, the author of The Language of Emotion, she talks about anger. And she says, anger is the stalwart sentry, castle sentry, that walks the perimeter of our soul, constantly watching us as well as others. And that stalwart sentry asks two questions. What needs to be protected? What needs to be restored? And being a huge fan of the TV series Game of Thrones, I'm all over this. Because I have a picture of my honorable guard walking the battlements of my castle, constantly monitoring for invaders and marauders. And if I let my guard go off, I fire my guard, or I let my guard go off duty, then all of a sudden my castle is wide open for invasion. My drawbridge is down, anybody can come in. Or on the other hand, if I send my honorary guard out there, my honorable guard out there on a berserker mission, slashing and burning out there, I'm still in the same problem because my castle is unwatched, my boundaries are in tatters, I'm open for invasion. Open for invasion. And that brings me back to my little story that I promised that I would tell you a little earlier. So I hope I don't have any of my students from my dealing with anger classes in here. If I do and you run into them, don't tell them this story. Please don't tell them this story. So here it is. I have a colleague, an associate, and she's an artist. So she phones me and she says, Deborah, I think you need to sign up for this intermediate watercolor class. And I say to her, well, I don't think the intermediate class would be good for me because I took a beginner class with you 3 or 4 years ago, and in fact, I've forgotten everything I ever learned in that class. I don't even remember anything about it. So I think, no, it's going to be over my head. I don't think that's a good class for me. She says, oh, no, don't worry about it. You'll have fun. It'll be great. You just come in, you paint, you'll enjoy it. She bats that aside. So then I say to her, well, you're telling me that the class starts at 6 o'clock. And I work most nights until about 4:30, 4:45. It's going to be a rush for me to get home. I'm going to be stressed out. I'm trying to get myself organized so that I can get there on time. And she says to me, oh, don't worry about that. It's just down the road from where you live. You'll be able to handle it. No problem. You can make it. No big deal, she says to me. So then I say to her, well, you know, for the last few Wednesdays, I've had things going on. So I was actually looking forward to my Wednesdays to relax, take it easy, and enjoy myself. And she says, oh, hey, no worry about that. Watercolor classes are so relaxing. You'll love it. Gotta come. You're going to just sit there. You're going to enjoy it. Have a great time. You're going to relax, she says to me. So she bats that aside. So then I say to her, well, you're telling me there's 8 classes. I know right off the hop I'm going to miss at least 3 of them, maybe even 4. I know I'm going to miss the first class where you're going to be telling everybody about what to do. So I'm going to miss classes. She says, don't worry about that. We're going to be doing something different every week, so you're not going to miss anything from the week before, so it doesn't matter. So I think you should do this. So what do you think I do? I tell her, I'll consider it. Thinking, I won't rock the boat. I'm just going to be nice, all that kind of wonderful stuff. So the next day in my inbox, I get a flyer. And it explains all about the course and where to sign up. That's underlined. And there it is in my mailbox. Now, you can imagine I'm starting to get pretty annoyed at this. I'm thinking, what the heck is this? But I don't see anything. So the very next day, I get a text message. And the text message says, have you signed up yet? So I'm starting to feel like I'm in a Shrek movie with Eddie Murphy playing the donkey who keeps saying, are we there yet? Are we there yet? So I'm feeling pretty badgered at this particular point in time. But what do? Against my better judgment, and I've already sent my honorary guard off on coffee break, I sign up for the course. Yes, and you can imagine how this story ends. It does not end well. Because, of course, I miss half the classes. I'm late for all of them. I get to the class. Everybody's already started. I rush in. I'm flying around. I'm trying to get myself organized. I'm trying to have fun. I'm trying to do this thing. Everybody in the class is doing these beautiful watercolor paintings, and I'm doing stick people. So I'm feeling like I'm back in grade 2, feeling very inadequate. And I asked the teacher for a little bit of help, and she says, oh, well, I'm in the middle of painting one of my paintings, so she puts me off. So now I'm really steamed. So the thing that really bugs me about this whole thing, the only class that I thought I was actually going to get there on time is, I'm roaring down the street, I'm almost there, and I'm at an intersection, and all of a sudden, ding, 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 down comes a railway crossing. So here I sit behind a train for 20 minutes. 20 minutes I'm sitting there. So if I was angry about being pressed to go to the class in the first place, now I'm really steamed. And it's like the universe is thumbing its nose at me saying, you see what you get when you ignore your anger? This is what you get when you send your honorary guard off on duty. You send them off for coffee break. That's what happens. This is what you get. If I never see another tube of watercolor paint in my life, I'm going to be happy about that. Ignoring my anger was an extreme act of self-denial. I allowed myself to get pushed into something I did not want to do. And I was angry about it, but I said nothing to keep the peace. Said nothing to keep the peace. We need our honorable sentry on guard at all times. Managing our battlements, making sure our boundaries are not getting violated. We need that. We need it. It keeps us safe and our boundaries intact. That is the gift our anger gives us. We need our honorable sentry. We absolutely do. We need to honor our anger. It is our protector, and it is our agent of change. Thank you.